Welcome to the Buddhist Society of Victoria's Sunday morning program. Good morning to you all in Australia. Of course, elsewhere in the world it'll be a different time. And of course, you may realise, I have to have a disclaimer, I am not Venerable Chi Kuang Sunim, who was advertised. Unfortunately, Venerable Chi Kuang Sunim is sick and can't give the talk today. But our thoughts are with her of metta, healing, that she may recover soon. And maybe towards the end of the month she'll be able to speak with us. So if I'm not Venerable Chi Kuang Sunim, who am I? I am Ajahn Nisarano, Australian monk who ordained with Ajahn Brahm 23 years ago, almost 24 years ago, but have lived in Sri Lanka for many years. But now based in Newbury Buddhist Monastery outside Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. So, as usual, the format for this morning, we have the precepts, and then we do the chanting, the recollection of Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and loving kindness too. Then a Dhamma talk, comments, followed by comments, questions and complaints, as I like to say. And I think the only announcements that that I have in mind at the moment is, of course, we're all going through in Melbourne and Victoria. We're going through the COVID-19 lockdown, which is a lockdown, stage 4 lockdown, called the Circuit Breaker, for 5 days, and that will finish on midnight on Wednesday, or just after midnight. For the moment, the monastery, Newbury Buddhist Monastery, is closed to visitors, but after that, after Wednesday midnight, just after midnight on Wednesday, this could all change. And you can check the website, the Buddhist Society of Victoria website, the Newbury Buddhist Monastery website, and also the Facebook, and that will let you know. And of course, these changes, Venerable Chi Kuang Sunim not being here, myself, and the COVID restrictions, totally unexpected. And this points to, as always, this quality that we talk about, uncertainty, impermanence, unreliability. We cannot predict. Unpredictability, that's a good word. So this is actually one of the qualities that the Buddha highlights in our experience, and which we often ignore. So it's something that we're reminded of with the COVID-19 restrictions, and with Venerable Chi Kuang not being able to give the talk today. But the theme for today was suggested to me, or came to my mind, I should say, because of events this weekend. So I'd like to ask the viewers, not that you're going to reply, what 2 events are being celebrated this weekend? What 2 events are being celebrated this weekend? I think everybody knows. I mean, pretty difficult not to. Of course, the first one, and it started on Friday or even Thursday evening, the New Year's Eve, is the Lunar New Year. Sometimes called the Chinese New Year, but these days Lunar New Year, because it's also the New Year for Korea, Vietnam and many other countries too that have a Chinese culture, have been influenced by Chinese culture. And so I'd like to say, Xin Nian Kwa Le, Xin Nian Kwa Le. Hopefully the tones are right, which means Happy Lunar New Year. So that's very good. I know that most people, I'm told this, would prefer to hear Kong Hee Fat Choi, which I've told means may you make a big fortune or make a big wealth. And of course this is the first, Friday was, the 12th, was the first day of the new year, the first month, the new year, the first day of the new year. And it's of course a cultural holiday, a religious holiday that's celebrated in China and many other places. And we'll see lion dances, dragon dances, fireworks, family gatherings. Not so much in Melbourne this year, I think. Unfortunate, it's the way it's happened actually. And visiting friends, and of course the ubiquitous red envelopes, usually called PAO envelopes, I think PAO envelopes, yeah. Ong Pao, yeah, Ong Pao. And it's also a traditional time to honour the deities and our ancestors, and ends after 15 days. What a new year! That's really a new year, 2 weeks. Which must be all these big lanterns. But of course, what is today? I was reminded when someone came today. Of course, I already knew. It's St. Valentine's Day. So I had to do all my research, actually, on Wikipedia, of course, and found that this day is named after a Christian saint who was martyred. There was actually 3 Christian saints with the same name, but the most one related to this day most is St. Valentine of Rome. And it's a Christian feast, a minor Christian feast that's still celebrated in a lot of the Christian churches, Anglicans, Lutheran, Catholic and Orthodox. But as time went on, it took on new dimensions due to folk traditions and became much more associated with romance and romantic love, and has become quite a phenomena around the world. And it's also a very significant commercial holiday too, or celebration. So it is very much a celebration of love and affection. So this is, and of course people associate it with sending greeting cards and gifts, don't they? You know, and it says the Wikipedia says dating and church services, but giving chocolates too is another big one. And I remember that this St. Valentine's Day used to be anonymous too. That was when I was younger, and I was talking to somebody this morning who said it was the same. But I don't think that's the case now. And I remember when I was younger, I sent St. Valentine's cards, but you always made it anonymous. But I did it for a sense of fun, actually. It was a bit of fun. And the person would never have guessed, I think it was from me, except a sense of humour, perhaps. Oh, yes. And but these days, of course, you know, if things like that are anonymous, you know, you receive flowers at the office and nobody knows who it's from, or a card, or chocolates, or whatever. Of course, people may be a bit worried, because now we have, since my time, as my days as a younger person, now we have stalking. So people are worried about stalkers, aren't they? So, but for me, it was just a bit of fun, actually. So, and so the question, these 2 themes suggested certain ideas to me, and it made me think, well, what makes the world go round? What do you think makes the world go round? Usually people say, money. And that's part of Chinese New Year, or the Lunar New Year for sure. But I think the more important thing, one of the most important things for all human beings, and probably the animals too, very much the case, is relationships. And both these celebrations, the Lunar New Year and St. Valentine's Day, are celebrating relationships. So I thought I'd focus on the aspect of relationships and relate it to the Buddha's teaching. And to begin with, of course, you know, first of all, particularly the Chinese or the Lunar New Year. And I'll just quote a comment from the Buddha about, in a sutta called the Sigalaka Sutta, or Sigala Ovada Sutta sometimes it's called, which is in the long discourses of the Buddha, Digha Nikaya, and it's sutta number 31. He talks about different types of relationships and how to bring peace and freedom from fear in those relationships. But at the end of that sutta, he has this lovely verses, and this is only part of them, they're very nice. And he says here, giving gifts and kindly speech, a life well spent for others' good, even-handed in all things, impartial as each case demands. These things make the world go round, like the chariot's axle pin, the axle. And then he talks about the relationships between children and parents, and how if this were not the case, then there would be no respect for mother and father. So celebrating relationships, particularly in terms of the Lunar New Year, is all about family, children and parents, of course, husbands and wives and friends. So St. Valentine's Day is a different focus. Still relationships, different focus. Romantic and sexual relationships. So this is another area which I'll deal with in a minute, in shortly anyway. I don't think it's going to be a minute. So the family and friends, those sorts of relationships, as I mentioned, the Buddha talks about those in some detail actually, and it's a famous sutta. It's the advice to a layman called Sigalika, and this sutta talks about the different types of relationships, and he talks about it in a different way. He talks about what binds these relationships together. In other words, the mutual duties or responsibilities between these relationships as a bond for peace and freedom from fear. So we'll focus on, he mentions more types of relationships, but we'll focus on children and parents and wives and husbands and friends. So this is the sutta, and I'll read some of it because it's very lovely to hear the word of the Buddha, and it gives you a connection with the teachings, and this is very important actually to establish that connection with the actual teachings of the Buddha, rather than hearing everything as a commentary on his teachings. And so this begins, "Thus have I heard," as most of the suttas begin. "Once the Blessed One was staying at Rajagaha, at the squirrel's feeding place in the bamboo grove." Sounds lovely, doesn't it? "And at that time, Sigalika, the householder's son, having got up early and gone out of Rajagaha, was paying homage with wet clothes and hair and with joined palms to the different directions, to the east, the south, the west, the north, above and below." So when a person has wet clothes and hair, it's a sign of, in India at that time, perhaps still, of mourning. So this is something related to mourning. And so the Buddha is going on alms round, and he sees Sigalika paying homage to the different directions. And he says, "Householder son, why have you got up early to pay homage to the different directions?" And then he says, "The Blessed One, my father, when he was dying, told me to do so. And so, Blessed One, out of respect for my father's words, which I revere, honour and hold sacred, I have got up thus early to pay homage in this way to the 6 directions." And so this is the background to the sutta. And of course then the Buddha continues, "But, householder's son, this is not the right way to pay homage to the 6 directions, according to the Noble One's disciples." So these are the Buddha's disciples, according to those that are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. Well, Blessed One, how should one pay homage to the 6 directions according to the Noble One's discipline? And the Buddha then tells Sigalika how that can be done. And this is the overview where he says, "And how, householder's son, does the Noble One's disciples protect the 6 directions? The 6 things are to be regarded as, these 6 things are to be regarded as the 6 directions. The east denotes mother and father. The south denotes teachers. The west denotes wife and children. The north denotes friends and companions. Below denotes servants, workers and helpers. Above denotes ascetics and Brahmins, like the Buddha and his Sangha of monks and nuns." And then the Buddha continues, "There are 5 ways in which a child should minister to their mother and father as the eastern direction." So he's taking the east first, and that's, of course, what's the east? It's where the sun comes up. So it's where life begins. So very important. That's probably why it is the eastern direction. And so the 5 things that a child should do for their mother or their father is, having been supported by their parents, they will support their parents. So that's usually when they get older, maybe when they get sick. They will perform their duties for them if the parents are ill, unable to do it, or for some other reason occupied. So this is number 2, and number 3 is they will keep up the family traditions. So whatever traditions the family has, they'll keep them going, like making donations to a temple or a monastery or whatever. They may have other traditions that they keep up, like charity. They might give charity to people. They might have other traditions that they keep going. There's probably some funny traditions too, I think, nevertheless. And the next one is they will be worthy of their heritage. So in other words, they'll live up to their family's heritage, their sense of their identity as a family, and maybe going back generations and generations too. So, and the last one is after their parents' deaths, the children will distribute gifts on their behalf. And this is particularly at monasteries, at temples, at these sorts of places, to make merit for their parents who've passed away. So it's very common in Buddhist countries. So they're the 5 things that children can do for their parents. But then the Buddha talks about the 5 things parents should do for their children. So this is an interesting list too. And a parent will restrain their children from doing bad, doing things that will be harmful to themselves and to others. So in other words, this is probably giving them the moral precepts, giving them idea of morality, ethics. And this is very important because values are really all we give our children. If you give them good values, fantastic. They'll have a happy life, and there'll be a contribution to a society as well. But if they don't have good values, it will probably ruin them and others as well. So this is what parents give. They help their children to restrain from doing what is bad. And of course this relates to the Buddha's, the Avada Patimokkha, where the Buddha says, Sabba papasa akaranang, not doing anything that is bad. And then the second one, of course, goes along with that chant that I just did, which is supporting them to do good. So this is the negative and the positive in a sense. The ability to restrain is a very, very important quality because it allows us to say no to negative states of mind, negative speech, negative action, negative states of mind. And this is not a small thing. Because if we don't have that ability, if we don't have that break, we are really just going to be subject to a lot of very strong negative speech, actions and thought, and not being able to restrain it. So it's for our happiness and well-being that we do that. So the second one, as I mentioned, is supporting their children in doing good, and also the very practical, Buddha always very practical, teaching them some skill. So this would be giving them education in our context, so that they can make a living and support themselves and possibly their parents too, as time goes by. And this one is an interesting one. And find a suitable partner and a suitable partner. So this is quite a common thing in Buddhist countries, that people will seek out a partner for their children. And therefore we actually have quite often arranged marriages, so which is very different from the West. But I'm not sure that the success rate is much different from romantic marriages too, because we see so many romantic marriages break up. I'm not sure that the success rate is that much different. Certainly, an arranged marriage, the expectations will be not like romantic expectations, so it's quite different. And in due time, this is number 5, hand over the inheritance to their children. That's the parents handing over their inheritance to the children. So that's important too. And of course to do it in a very fair way. It doesn't cause division in the family. They can often do that. So that's the parents and the children as the eastern direction. And then the next direction, and this is very important too for relationships, is there are 5 ways in which a husband should minister to his wife as the Western direction, so it's the other direction. And so this is, and the list is by honouring her. That sounds nice, doesn't it? So this is being a positive, giving emphasis to good qualities that person, the wife, this person's wife has. And the second one relates to it too, because it says by not disparaging her. And of course this is very important in any relationship, not to have a lot of fault-finding, negative comments, particularly if they can become very harmful if repeated again and again. So this is very positive. This is very good advice, actually. So by honouring her, so this is the positive, not disparaging her. This is the negative. And for the husband, not being unfaithful. That's a very important aspect of a relationship. All relationships are based on trust, and if one or other of the partners is not faithful, that trust goes out the window. And of course the same happens when there is violence within the family. That breaks trust too, because a person just cannot trust that the other person won't use violence, either physical, emotional, psychological, verbal, all those sorts of different types of violence. So this is the number 3, not being unfaithful. And the fourth one is by giving authority to his wife, to look after things, to give her the authority to act on behalf of himself, the household, the family. So this is important too. So it's sort of empowering, isn't it? It's empowering. It's not trying to dominate, it's trying to share the responsibilities, which is a very important aspect of relationships. And the last one's interesting, by providing her with adornments. Adornments. I'd prefer to think of this as gifts or something like that. So adornments. In those days, I guess jewellery still is. Jewellery is very important, diamonds and all that sort of thing. So they're the 5 that the Buddha recommends to Sigalika for a husband to his wife. And these are the 5 that he recommends for the wife to the husband. The 5 are, first of all, by properly organising her work, whatever that work is. Probably in those days in the family, in the home, but these days not necessarily, actually. These days I think women have many, what do they say, many things to juggle, actually. It's quite difficult, family life and work outside the home. And by being kind to the servants, that's nice. If you've got servants, it's not something that happens much in Australia or in the West, because servants are very expensive. But it happens in Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka. Many people have servants, and they become part of the family, actually. That's another relationship. But I won't go into a relationship with servants. And the third one, same as for the husband, not being unfaithful. Very important, because if there isn't trust, the relationship's really rocky. And of course, in those days, it wasn't uncommon for a wealthy person, a wealthy man, to have more than one wife. And that was quite a suffering for the wives, actually. Not easy. And the fourth one, the Buddha recommends for wives for that the way they reciprocate to their husband is by protecting the stores, it says. So this is protecting the goods and the things that they own, looking after them, making sure that they're not stolen or whatever, and caring for them so that they don't break down and so on. So that's a very important aspect of it. And the last one, by being skillful and diligent in all she has to do. So this is just the qualities we bring to what we do, is being skillful and diligent, being careful with what we do. So these are good qualities to have in mind, because they are skillful qualities, that's skillful and diligent. Yeah, they're positive qualities. And I'll just deal with friends and family, and this is the next one the Buddha talks about. I won't deal with the the teachers, that was another one the Buddha mentions. And there are 5 ways which a person should minister to their friends and companions. And this is very good advice for anyone, actually. Buy gifts. Everybody likes gifts, and actually they can really touch the heart, and they can mend difficulties in relationships by giving gifts, especially if they're given with a good heart, not with a manipulative or an agenda, so that we think by doing this, we'll get what we want. That's not really giving a gift wholeheartedly. By kindly words, that's really important, and by looking after their welfare, so we help them in whatever way we can, practically, and also emotionally. This is almost covered by the 4th one, by treating them like oneself, our friends. That's lovely, isn't it? It's really nice, because if you think of, what you like and dislike, then, the things you do for your friends, the things you say to your friends will be things that you like, that you wouldn't mind hearing, you wouldn't mind others doing for you. So this is a good way to gauge our conduct, our actions and our speech, and is really the basis for morality. I always ask, myself, would I like to hear this? If somebody said this, what I'm about to say, if somebody said it to me, would I like to hear this? And also with actions too. Would I like somebody else to do that action towards me or affecting me? And the last one is a very important one, actually, for trust in relationships, and that's keeping one's word. That's the 5th. So they're the 5 ways that a person ministers or helps their friends. And then the 5 ways that the friends reciprocate towards that person is by, this is interesting, by looking after that person when they are inattentive. Isn't it? The term, I think, is actually a euphemism for, say when they're sick, or the commentaries even say when the person is drunk. So they haven't got their wits about them. So a friend is going to look after them when they're under the weather, either due to ill health or whatever reason. They are afflicted, as they say. So this is very important. And then the next one goes with it, is by looking after the friend's property when they are inattentive. So this is very important too. You look after them, number 1, so they don't come to grief themselves, because, for instance, if people drink, they can have accidents, there can be all sorts of repercussions, violence and so forth. So if we look after our friends when they're not in a good condition, but we should also look after their property as well, their vehicles or whatever that may be affected by the fact that they cannot look after themselves. And the 3rd one is by being a refuge when our friend is afraid. That's nice, isn't it? Being a refuge when our friend is afraid. And by not deserting our friend when they are in trouble. That's a very, very important one. Not being a fair weather friend. That's what we call it in English. And the last one is, and showing concern for our friends' children, for the family, looking out for them as well. So that is very important. So that is Buddha's advice in terms of more family relationships, and relationships between friends. And as I said, this Lunar New Year is all about that. Eating is a big part of it, but also getting together, and creating that bonds and that connections between people, positive connections. The important thing with all of these is the Buddha says that for each of them, that by covering this direction, in this case it's the northerly direction, we are making it at peace and free from fear. So these relationships give a sense of stability and also this bring peace. They reduce this sort of conflict if we have these reciprocal duties between the different types of relationship. So now having dealt with the family type of relationships, I talk about those types of relations that St. Valentine's Day celebrates. So this is, people are really interested in this. So there's lots of types of love, and of course, I always liked Aikima. We used to talk about metta a lot, and she'd say, that there are types of love that are with conditions and some without conditions. And the type of love that, of course, St. Valentine's Day is celebrating is with conditions, big conditions. And it's romantic and sexual love that it's celebrating. Though many people will focus on the romantic. So St. Valentine's Day, sometimes too, it's a good point that romantic love and sexual love can be two different things. Sometimes there's more emphasis on the romantic than on the sexual. And on a day like today, giving flowers, giving chocolates, sending greeting cards, it's more towards the romantic. So that's the emphasis with it. And of course it reminds us, this all comes too from, in the West, because this is where this St. Valentine's Day is coming from, is Greek mythology. And they have two gods to do with the different types of love. One's Eros, and of course, no, it's easy to tell what that's related to. Eros, erotic. So that's related to the god of love and sex. So that's an aspect of it. And the other aspect you get in Greek mythology, and even it's in Christianity, is called agape. This is the other type of love. This is unconditional love. And of course, in that Christian context, it's love for God, or God's love for oneself. So these relationships, this is a very powerful relationship, sexual relationships, romantic relationships, are very powerful. And often you see it in the West particularly, you see it in the East as well. I see it in Sri Lanka. As, everywhere you hear, what do you hear? If you hear music, love songs. You hear it in Sri Lanka, you hear it all over the world. They're all about love songs, and usually about broken hearts, actually, is a big aspect of love songs, actually. Usually that's a big part. But the thing that this signals, doesn't it? Money may be important, but these romantic and sexual relationships are actually more important than even money, actually. And they're seen as being, they provide meaning and purpose for people's lives. And you can see it celebrated everywhere, in poetry, you can see it in songs, paintings, it's just everywhere. The importance of these sexual relationships, romantic relationships. So it's something we're very much aware of. I think most people are who are watching this. But, of course, these romantic and sexual relationships don't come without their drawbacks, their problems. And I was just going to talk a little bit about that, People will think, well, he is a Buddhist monk. But I have to also talk about what the Buddha thought about sexual relationships and their part in human life. But these sexual and romantic relationships can lead to very unrealistic expectations of other people, even of ourselves, and it can lead to this disappointment. And one can see with romantic love particularly, they often say, the psychologists have got there's a special term for it actually. They say this romantic love can last up to about 2 years. Can last for up to 2 years. They have there's a technical term they use for it, and it is the mind is in a certain state, isn't it? That it's I see it as like a projecting of qualities, good qualities on the other person, and that can last for up to 2 years. After that, I say, hopefully, you're good friends too, because then that'll count. Actually, it'll really count. But so much of this romance and sexual attraction is projection. What we want to see, we do see. And I call it, it's like an image, an internal image we build up. And sometimes it doesn't relate too well to the actual person, as you realize over time. And that image I call it subhanimitta. This is what the Buddha called it. Subhanimitta leads to a passion, to sexual desire, all these things. And it's good to see that it's a mental image. It's one that's made up. And actually we're often filling it in with all the things that we like. And we're seeing it in the person. Whether they're actually there, who knows. And it's our idea of perfection, isn't it? And the interesting thing, I remember Ajahn Brahm teaching this, and I thought, wow, that's so true. It's not the actual relationship that is bringing out this love and so forth. It is the feeling we associate with that person. It's something internal. It's not that this other person's giving us all this. It's a feeling, we call it Vedana, coming up in us. We have a very pleasant feeling for this person. Of course, that can change, and often does. So the example is when someone falls in love, we say falls in love actually, and it's actually, it's like the mind is really in a different state, it's changed gears. Some people would say slightly crazy. And from that, when someone falls in love, they perceive everything about the person that they're focusing on as lovable. They're just perfect. And the more we think about them, so we have this view that they're sort of lovable already, and then we start thinking about it and they become even more lovable. And our perceptions chime in too, and we see proof again and again that they are really lovable and perfect for us. And of course this sort of projection is also, it's taking, this is going to be forever. We talk about forever. That's what they say in romantic love. Usually they say, this is forever. So we're looking for permanent happiness. And it reminds me of a song I heard years ago. It was a bit cynical, they say. Yeah, cynical. That the singer said, I think it was Linda Ronstadt, very old, going back a long time. Did you think forever would last the whole night? Did you think forever would last the whole night? And that's what romantic love is about. It's going to be forever. And of course that's not quite real. And this is going to satisfy us completely. And of course we take it very, very personally. But as Ajahn Brahm mentions in one of his stories actually, of course when people fall out of love, it's the opposite. And actually sometimes the degree to they fall into love can match the degree that they fall out of love. So Ajahn Brahm, I think he's written a story about the pig of an ex. So the ex-partner that one thinks is a pig. So this is one of the negative sides of romantic or sexual love. One shouldn't talk about this on Valentine's Day, perhaps. Certainly the company selling chocolates and flowers don't want to hear this. And also when we think about romantic or sexual love, there's a lot of self involved. There's a lot of self. We have a lot of expectations, as I mentioned before, of the other person. There's lots of conditions or limits. The person has to love us back, that's for sure. If they don't, then we're really upset. We want something back from them. And what that can lead to, of course, when it's not returned, when it's not reciprocated, it can lead to frustration. It can lead to manipulation and violence, because people do get violent. The person that they regard as so perfect and everything, they can actually kill them, harm them. And of course many, and also the other possibility, and happens quite a bit, is people commit suicide because of this. Particularly the young people have no experience. They think, their life's finished, so because this person's no longer in their life. So that's with the romantic love. This is the sort of drawbacks to it, and how it's constructed in our minds too. There are other types of love that I won't touch on much, and that's like brotherly or sisterly love, people, camaraderie, I suppose you call it camaraderie. that people have, and that's there can be a very a good bond between people. There's self-love, and there's also love of ideas and causes. And we can see that, people get attached to their views of particular causes and so on, and they can become they can do anything when we can do anything when we're attached to a view. But of course, for the Buddha, the sexual desire, the romantic desire, is kama raga. This is sexual desire, and it's a part of desire. This is called, we can say kama chanda, desire, kama, K long A-M-A, is desire that's connected with the five senses. And it's actually what keeps us getting reborn. I call it the taproot of samsara. It keeps us being reborn. And this part, the sexual desire is a very, very strong part of it. And, not surprisingly, that's why monks and nuns are celibate. And also it causes monks and nuns, quite often, it can be a struggle for them. Because this is a very, very deep instinct, a very, very deep drive. So it's a very important one that we come to terms with if we're to end the cycle of birth and rebirth. Because, as I say, this is the karma chanda. We are really, or karma tanha actually, that wanting for the five sense experiences. And this is one of the strongest. And also, it also contributes to what we call bhava tanha. And this is to be, to exist, to make our mark, to be someone, to have some legacy carry on, And this is a very big part of having children, of creating things, is that sense of legacy. So all these sorts of these wantings, these tanhas, these cravings, they lead to rebirth. So they're obviously things that if we're very serious about developing the path to Nibbana, we must deal with as the cause, one of the causes of suffering, of the difficulties we live in. So that's very much where the Buddha is coming from. And of course you probably all remember, the sutta where in the Majjhima Nikaya, where Queen Malika says to her husband, King Pasenadi, that the Buddha has taught that all those who are dear to us, that we are close to, they are the source of our unhappiness, our difficulties in life, our sufferings in life. And of course he said to her, rubbish. It cannot be so. We didn't do this. Oh dear. All right. So the king said rubbish, and then the Buddha, then Queen Malika asked someone to go to the Buddha and ask, what did you mean by this? And of course the Buddha explained it, and he said, if somebody who is very close to us, very dear to us, what happens when they pass away? Or they get very sick, close to death even, or they become, estranged from us, we become separated. And of course it brings up a lot of suffering for a person. If it's somebody you don't know, you don't get upset about it. And so this person came back to Queen Malika and told her what the Buddha had advised. And the Buddha, and she told that to the king, and she said to the king, well, if Princess, I can't remember her name, were to get sick or were to die, what would happen to you, Your Majesty? And he said, well, of course, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I'd be really upset. And she said, this is exactly why, the Buddha said, those that are dear to us bring us the most difficulty and suffering in our lives, because we're attached to them being there, and life isn't predictable. Life is impermanent. We will change. We cannot keep things the same. So this is part of the Buddha's teaching about this sort of sexual and romantic love. I've just remembered I didn't do the precepts and the chanting. We'll do that towards the end. So out of sequence, but I just saw the card and I thought, oh, something's missing. So if this is the Buddha's teaching, you know, about our situation, that this sexual desire, romantic desire, is not something really to be encouraged. And it reminded me actually of a sutta by the Venerable Anand. I should have liked to have checked this one up, where he's talking to somebody and who was infatuated with him, and then the Venerable Ananda, and they asked, you know, how can one use defilements to overcome the defilements? And the Venerable Ananda said to this person, said, all the defilements can be used to overcome the other that defilement, except for sexual desire. That cannot be. And the reason for that, I think, is because when sexual desire arises, we get so absorbed into it that it's not possible to use it, as it were, turn it against itself, so we can see it for what it is and give rise to insight. So I think that's why he said it. Though at the same time it reminds me in the Theravada, one monk was going on alms round, and he was in a village, and there was a woman, she was an entertainer probably, singing and dancing, and lust arose in his mind, so it says in his verses. But then, so did the insight come of the danger in this, where this leads to, what's the consequences of it. And he saw it so clearly that he became enlightened from that experience. So maybe that does show it is possible, only if you have, say, the teaching of a Buddha that's pointing to the dangers in these things. So that was an interesting one. But of course, what sort of love is the Buddha encouraging? What sort of love is the Buddha encouraging? And of course that is, I know you're not going to answer, but metta. So metta is the sort of love that the Buddha is encouraging. And this is love without conditions. Metta is a really important emotion. All beings have it. Human beings have it. Everyone has it. Otherwise it would be impossible to develop if we did not have the seed of metta in us. And I like what Ayya Khema used to call it, a supreme emotion. She said there were 4 supreme emotions, but this is one of those supreme emotions. The others are compassion, joy for others' success, and equanimity. So those are the 4 supreme emotions. But it's a feeling of friendliness, we call it loving kindness, but friendliness is closer to the meaning of metta, which is related to the word mitta, for friend. But it has a sense of goodwill, well-wishing, all those, and real warmth too for the person, for ourselves and others. And it's gentle. It's harmless. It's not wishing harm to the other person, and it's unconditional. This is what we're aiming at. It's not just for those that we're close to. It's for all beings, and it's not just for the ones that treat us well. That's very easy. But also for those that we have a difficult relationship with. And of course, the most important thing, it's not expecting anything back from that other person or the situation, which is really the opposite of romantic love or sexual love. And so I'd like to bring up another teaching of the Buddha, which makes this really clear. It's beautiful, actually. And I've mentioned it on previous occasions, a famous sutta called the Imperfection Suitor. And this is Upakilesa Sutta. And it's sutta number 128 in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses. And this sutta occurs after the Buddha had experienced this dispute between the monks in a place called Kosambi. And they'd had a dispute over an issue of the monks' rules, very small, and they wouldn't listen to the Buddha at all. Even, It's amazing that that should happen. And they said that they would take full responsibility for it, and he should just have a pleasant abiding, which means to experience the bliss, the happiness of meditation, which he could. And so the Buddha realized, can't do this, it's impossible to talk to these monks at this stage, and so he left. And when he left, he went and visited some other monks, Venerable Anuruddha and his two companions, Venerable Nandya and Venerable Kimbala, I think it is. And this is the teaching this is what happened when he met Venerable Anuruddha, who later became, he was an arahant and one of the major disciples. And the Buddha said to Venerable Anuruddha, I hope, Anuruddha, that you are all living in concord, with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. That must have been important after having witnessed, this dispute where the monks were really, using harsh words. They call them verbal daggers, they're described in the suttas. And then the Venerable Anuruddha, he says to the Buddha, surely, Venerable Sir, we are. But of course the Buddha doesn't let it rest there. He says, but Anuruddha, how do you live thus? So Venerable Anuruddha's reply is classic, and I think it's good advice for all of us. He said, Venerable Sir, this is talking to the Buddha, as to that, I think thus, it's a gain for me, it's a great gain for me that I am living with such companions in the holy life. So this is having appreciation for the people we live with. It's very important to see the good qualities in them, not the faults, to see the bigger picture, because usually the people we live with, lots of pluses in our life together. And so to look with this sense of gratitude, with thanks. And then Venerable Anuruddha continues, I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness towards these venerable ones, both openly and privately. So this is very important. I'll mention these a bit later, maybe. And I maintain verbal acts of loving kindness towards them, both openly and privately. It's a good distinction, isn't it? It's in everywhere. It's virtually saying 24/7. I maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards them, openly and privately. I consider, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do? Then I set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do. And this is a lovely part, this nice part, where Venerable Anuruddha says, to sum up, we are different in body, Venerable Sir, but one in mind. Isn't that beautiful? That's lovely. So, as I mentioned, this sense of gain, it's a great gain for me, this gratitude and thankfulness, very important in our relationships. And as I say, it's a bigger picture, because sometimes when we live with each other, we can focus on small things, and they become so big, they get blown up. But really, if we look at the bigger picture, there's so much to be grateful for. And this quality makes our mind soft, which is a very good preparation for doing metta meditation. But it's also a pleasant experience for us. This sense of gratitude and happiness, gratitude and thankfulness makes us happy, actually. So it's an important quality to bring to our relationships if we live together, is this gratitude and thankfulness. And acts of friendliness. I maintain bodily acts of friendliness, Venerable Anuruddha says, towards these venerables, both openly and privately. And these, of course, these are the things that are so important when we live together, is to be thinking of the other person, be thoughtful of what they need, thoughtful of how our speech and actions may affect them, and to be as helpful as we can, where we can. The help we can give to people is like a gift to them. It can be small things like cleaning, gardening, washing. It can be like listening to them, supporting them, when they're going through difficult times. And as I mentioned before, earlier in the other relationships, giving gifts is a nice action that actually can go to the heart. And of course this reduces our sense of self. We are not thinking so much of ourselves first, thinking of the other person. And very importantly, it's not just in public, because some people can be quite well behaved in public, but in private they may not be so well behaved. So this is even when the other person doesn't know we're doing it for them, to do things, to clean up, clear up things, just things that will be supportive for the other person. And then we can get some happiness from doing that, even though they may never know. We know. And so this brings a sense of harmony to the relationship, but it also brings happiness to us. And this is a very important quality that we develop in the mind, this happiness. And so this is the actions, and it's also important that we develop it through our speech, so this is what the Venerable Anuruddha mentions as well. In friendly speech, I maintain speech which is friendly towards them, towards my companions in the holy life, both openly and privately. And this is a big area. It's not a small area. I used to think, right speech is part of the Noble Eightfold Path. Oh, it's not that important. But in actual fact, this is a very big area where conflicts arise. This is where, the harmful, negative actions usually come from. First, speech, and then the actions. So the Venerable Anuruddha mentions, I maintain speech which is friendly towards my companions in the holy life, both openly and privately. So, and as I say, this causes the real hurts and can be the misunderstandings that really upset and can lead to violence even. And it reminds me of the Buddha saying that we are all born with an axe in our mouths. Isn't that a great saying? And he says, we're all born with an axe in our mouths, and a fool uses it through abusive speech, So right speech has to be something which is friendly, kind, gentle and warm. So, and of course, Venerable Anuruddha mentions openly and in private. And this in private is very important with speech, because this is when we don't talk behind somebody's back, when the person's not there, because often that will get back to them anyway. So this speech, speech is very important. Our friendly speech, friendly verbal acts, they call it. And so the speech in private, and this is a very nice way that the Buddha describes the right speech, and also he gives the negative and he also gives the positive. So it's a really important way of putting it. Abandoning false speech, one abstains from false speech. One speaks truth, adheres to truth, is trustworthy and reliable. One is no deceiver of the world. In relationships, that's so important, because if one is not truthful, if the speech is not truthful, the trust in the relationship will go out the window. The other person will think, well, I don't know if that's the case. And then the relationship, that intimacy, that connection is broken or damaged. And the second one is abandoning malicious speech. One abstains from malicious speech. One does not repeat elsewhere what one has heard here in order to divide those people from these. Nor does one repeat to these people, the ones one's with now, what one has heard elsewhere in order to divide these people from those. So this is divisive speech, isn't it? But instead, thus one is someone who reunites those who are divided, a promoter of friendships, who enjoys concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord. It's great, isn't it? A speaker of words that promote concord. So that's bringing people together, not dividing them. And in a family, in relationships, this is very important, not playing people off against other people. And the next one is abandoning harsh speech. One abstains from harsh speech. One speaks such words. So harsh speech, what is harsh speech? Harsh speech could be swearing. It can be swearing. It can be speech it's very dominating, coming from anger. It's got a very intimidating feel to it. It can be many types. Abusive speech of any type, where we really run the other person down. We talk about the qualities that we're saying they have and so on. It can be very, harsh. And instead of that, the Buddha talks about one speaks such words that are gentle, pleasing to the ear, and lovable. Isn't that nice? Lovable. And go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. So this is a very important aspect of speech, that it is pleasant, that we do have pleasant speech, and we avoid this harsh speech. As I mentioned recently in Australia, harsh speech, at least swearing, is very, very common. And as I've mentioned recently, sometimes people don't even know they're swearing, actually. So it's quite interesting. So they're not aware of right speech. And the next one, the last one the Buddha is talking about, is abandoning gossip. One abstains from gossip. And oftentimes people think, well, what's the harm in gossip? But of course we know that gossip can lead to many harmful things like character assassination. It can lead to a lot of the conflicts that we see in politics due to the social media. Can have a lot of big repercussions, actually, gossip. And can destroy people's reputations. And it may not be true. But instead, the Buddha says, one speaks at the right time. So that's good. Speaks what is fact, speaks on what is good, speaks on the Dhamma and the discipline. That's the teachings of the Buddha. One speaks at the right time, one speaks such words as are worthy of recording, reasonable, moderate, and beneficial. So that's really wonderful speech when it's like that. And that's very important for all of us to, this is a pretty high standard, but it's something that we can aim for. If we know about right speech, then we can go towards it. If we don't know about the Buddha's teaching of right speech, we will not think these things so important. And yet, our experience, everybody's experience is speech can be dynamite. It can be really, really harmful. And the third thing that the Venerable Anuruddha mentions, that I maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards them, both openly and privately. So, and this is very important because oftentimes we can have negative thoughts about a person and feelings arising. And so we don't want to encourage those ones. We want to let go of them. See them that they're not leading to our happiness and well-being, and we want to maintain positive feelings in the mind. And this, of course, is the aspect of right effort in the Buddha's path, avoiding negative mind states, emotions, letting go of negative emotions or mind states when they've arisen, developing positive mind states that haven't yet come up, and then maintaining them. And that's very important. So metta, developing metta is one of these ways. We can develop a positive mind state, metta meditation. So metta meditation, we can, I call it friendliness too, develop 24/7. So we develop not only on the cushion. Sometimes people think of it as a meditation, do on the cushion, you feel great. But of course, it's, as the Venerable Anuruddha is pointing out, it's when we interact, as our actions as well as our speech, that are important. And it's not only in public, it's in private. So what he's talking about, and what the Buddha is talking about, is a 24/7 practice of developing metta, of loving kindness. And it's not as if we won't get the benefits. If we have metta in mind, we'll find happiness, a sense of fullness, warmth, connection, and others will enjoy it too. They will be drawn by it. And at the end of Venerable Anuruddha's reply to the Buddha, he says, "Why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do? Then I set aside what I wish to do and do what these venerable ones wish to do." Now, do we do that? I think many people don't think like that, do they? Do we? We think, I want to do it my way. And if there's the song, of course, a famous song by Frank Sinatra, and many others have sung it too, doing it my way. And we often feel like we have to, when we do want to do it our way, it often creates conflict, doesn't it? It creates and sometimes the things we want to do are not really that important, that we do it our way. And so it's good to keep it in perspective, whether this is such an important thing. If it isn't something immoral or unethical, then it's perhaps not such a big thing to do it and do something differently. And this will create in relationships harmony, peace and unity. And of course, it's like a gift to the person that we are agreeing with. And so this is a very important aspect, and it's developing this sense of selflessness, isn't it? Not what we want to do. And of course in the West this is a very big thing, as individualism is a very big thing, so people are often emphasizing that rather than, thinking of the harmony in the group, in the family, in the community. And so it's good to be able to recognize where we can compromise and say, yes, let's do it your way. Why not? Why not? And that openness, as I say, will also strengthen the relationship, because we're willing to do it the way the other person would like it to be. So I'd like to end this Dhamma talk, which is about relationships, talking about the Lunar New Year and talking about St. Valentine's Day. I hope it's sort of brought it together in some sort of meaningful combination. I like the fact that these themes are really good because they they suggest things immediately. Very important for Dhamma talks to have themes or to have questions that bring up in aspects of Dhamma. So when we see that this is what makes the world go around, relationships, it's very important we put some effort into those relationships, realizing that when we are putting that effort in, we are developing this mind, we're developing our minds, we're developing our speech, we're developing our actions, and we're developing the Buddha's path to enlightenment, we're developing the Noble Eightfold Path. So these relationships are an important part of our practice, they're an important part of our life. So I think let's do them well. So I'd like to finish there, and now, before we have the questions and answers, I'd better do what I forgot to do at the beginning, because I got into talking about anicca, and that is to do the 3 refuges, the 5 precepts, recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, and also the chanting of loving kindness. These are important aspects of our practice. They're not just rituals. They can be rituals if people don't attach much purpose or meaning to them, but they're actually very, very meaningful. So we'll do them in Pali today, and because I did them in English last week. And if you'd like to join in at home, please do. Some of you probably you don't see this part because it's usually before the talk. So we can do this. So I will repeat the Namo Tassa 3 times, and then if you'd like to repeat it after me 3 times, I'll do the refuges one by one, and then if you repeat them, I will do the 5 precepts one by one, and if you would like to repeat after them. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Sorry, please do the Namo Tassa 3 times. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Sanghang saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchāmi. Tisaranagamanam nititaṃ. And now for the 5 precepts in Pali. Panatipata veramani sikapadaṃ samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikapadaṃ samadhiyami. Kame sumichachara veramani sikapadaṃ samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikapadaṃ samadhiyami. Sura merya majapamadatana veramani sikapadaṃ samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now we can do the recollections of the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha together. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijacharana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manusanam Buddha Bhagavati Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuiti Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Ujjupatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Nyaya patipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Samici patipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Yadidam Chattari Purisa Yugani Atta Purisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Ahunayo Pahunayo Dakinayo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Punyaketang Lokasati. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And now we can continue with the Karaniya Metta Sutta. I should have mentioned the chanting, I think, is in the chat, so you can see that if you're not familiar with the Pali of these chants. So we can begin the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Buddha's words on loving kindness. Karaniya Metta Kusalena Yang Tang Santang Padang Abhisamecha Sakko Ujucha Sujucha Suvacho Chasamudu Anatimani Santu Sakko Chasubarocha Pakijo Jasalahu Kavuti Sant Indriyon Janipakocha Apagabo Kulesu Ananugido Nachakundang Samachare Kinchi Yena Vinyupare Upawade Yung Sukino Wa Kemino Hontu Sambe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitata Yeke Chipana Buddhati Tasavata Varava Anavasesa Digava Ye Mahantava Majjhima Rasaka Anukatula Ditta Vacha Adita Ye Chandure Vasanti Avidure Bhutava Sambhave Siva Sambe Satta Bhavantu Sukhitata Naparo Parang Nikubeta Natimanyeta Katachinang Kanchi Byarozana Patigasanya Nanyamanya Sadukamicheya Matayata Niyang Put Mata Yataniyang Putang Ayusa Eka Puttamanurake Evam Pisambhabutesu Manasambhavaye Aparimanang Tancha Sambhalogasmin Manasambhavaye Aparimanang Udang Adochatiryancha Asambhadang Averang Asapatang Titan Sharang Nisino Sayano Yavatasa Vigatamido Etang Sating Aditeya Brahmametang Viharang Idamahu Ditinchanupagamma Silava Dasanena Sampano Kame Suvineya Gedang Nahi Jatu Gambaseyang Punareti, sadhu, 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 sadhu. So there we are. That was a bit unexpected. Part of change, isn't it? So that was the third aspect of it, the format change too. So now if there are any comments, questions or complaints, please, if there are, we can.
Thank you, Ajahn, for the lovely talk. We do have 4 questions and we only have 10 minutes.
All right, that's fine. That's
fine?
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Venerable Santa. Thank you for this.
So the first one is from our regular audience from Tokyo.
Tokyo, all right.
Yes. My parents passed away and left a lot of unfinished jobs. Should I spend my life to complete those jobs to take care of our relationship, or what is done and let them go?
I think you'd have to bring your own wisdom to that, but if something is very important to your parents, that's perhaps good to try and fulfill. It's always within your abilities and so forth, but some of that unfinished business may be not so important. So of course with life it's always prioritizing, isn't it? Finding out what's the most important thing to do, and of course you do your best to fulfill your parents' wishes. But as I say, some of that unfinished business may not necessarily be of that importance to your parents even, and perhaps why it's unfinished. Because I know a lot of the things I don't finish, I don't want to do. and maybe they're not so pressing. So good if you can get that sense of priority and importance. And of course, just having in mind what your parents would wish for you. And I don't think any parent would wish to burden their children with a lot of things that they know are going to take a lot of time and cause them a lot of difficulty and perhaps suffering in the process. So please keep it in perspective and focus on what's important to you and for your parents as well. Thank you for that. From Tokyo.
Thank you, Ajahn. The next question was related to Majjhima Nikaya 128.
128,
the one
yes.
you mentioned about milk and water.
Yes.
In order to be able to bend like milk and water, one needs to lose the sense of self. Would you like to give some practical measures? Thank you.
Right. One has to lose the sense of self. Of course, blending like milk and water, yes, you do have to reduce that sense of self. When you are practicing, say, metta by body, by actions, by speech, and through our minds, we're doing that actually because, as I mentioned at the end of the Venerable Anuruddha's comment, his reply to the Buddha, that he thinks, well, why don't I do what the other venerables wish to do? So when we are, speaking, acting, and thinking with metta, we are reducing this sense of self just by that process. We're increasing our awareness, this friendliness, this warmth, giving it to other people. So this is, the practice of the path is really aimed at reducing this sense of self, and it will happen very naturally. Of course, where the sense of self is really reduced is when there's major insights. That is actually where the big breakthrough comes, because the major insight, of course, for a stream enterer is to see that there is no permanent I, me, and self inside. And that is the breakthrough that makes the rest of the path possible. It's based on understanding there is nothing permanent in this world. There is no permanent happiness to be had. There's not a permanent self. And so this understanding and the fact that what is running our lives is conditioning. We are as we are because of our conditioning. And these conditions are creating the sense of personality and self we have at this moment, but it's not anything that's permanent. It's changing, it's ongoing, work in progress. So these are ways that we can do it. But all acts of kindness, gentleness, giving, these will all reduce self in a big way. And they're important because they're coming from the heart, aren't they? They're not just a mental or conceptual approach. But really the big breakthrough will come when we see anatta, non-self. And as I say, this will be the breakthrough to stream entry, sowan or sotapanna. Yes. So that's what I would say. So good. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Yes.
The next question. I'm scared of falling sick and getting hospitalized.
Yeah.
It would be a very big burden and waste of time for me and my family. How to deal with this worry?
Yeah, it's good to deal with that worry, because that worry can actually make you sick, can't it? It can make your immune system more vulnerable to becoming sick. So how do we reduce worrying about falling sick? This is the way we can do that is to understand, first of all, that this is part of life, isn't it? The Buddha focuses on old age, sickness and death. Sickness is part of it. And of course it's part of impermanence, this fact that everything is changeable, is unpredictable, unreliable. When we have that understanding that things are like this, they can change without a moment's notice. When the causes and conditions change, so can our situation, our health, our states of mind can change too. So when we have this understanding, it's like Ajahn Chah mentions that when there's a dam, if a dam doesn't have a spillway, this is where the excess water can run off, what happens? The water just builds up and then it'll eventually push the dam wall down. It'll collapse and then perhaps cause a lot of destruction below it. But if it has a spillway, a way that the excess water can flow off, there is no problem. And this spillway in this simile is, of course, understanding that life is impermanent, it's unpredictable, it's uncertain. And this is actually the reality of life. And when we know that, when we do have these experiences of old age, sickness and death, as we all get, having been born, having a body, we'll get those experiences in some shape or form and to some degree or other. So when we understand that that's part and parcel of what we have brought into coming to existence, having a human body, then that knowledge, that understanding can help us when we get sick, and then we can sort of not be swept away with it. We may not be able to say what Ajahn Brahm says when you go to the doctor and you're sick, and you should say to the doctor, "Something's right with me, doctor, I'm sick." Most people go, of course, and say the opposite, which is what we feel. But you may not be able to say that. But at least if you have the wisdom to understand, it's part of life, and it's not convenient. Life isn't convenient. Impermanence isn't convenient. And unpredictability, unreliability are not pleasant. When you know that, then you're not so swept away with it. So that's what I would suggest to you. Develop that wisdom aspect to see, and this will support you emotionally as well. So I hope that helps. So thank you. And the last one, is it?
Yes, the last question.
Yes.
How do one let go the anger that arises with a loved one without just suppressing or expressing the anger feelings? Because if suppressed, it might come up later and express very harsh way.
Yes. How to deal with feelings of anger and resentment, so not in either it's suppressing them or expressing them. Yes, that's like a whole talk, really. But basically, we realise, and this is one of my favourite sayings at the moment. It's a fake Buddha quote, but I still like it. It says, hanging on to anger or resentment is like drinking poison and then expecting the other person to die. So when we realise that this anger and resentment is something in me, the other person has triggered it, or the situation has triggered it, that can help us actually a bit, just to step back. We can step back and not react straight away with actions or speech. But of course, you know, when one is angry and upset, who needs the attention first? We do. The other person may not be upset or bothered at all, or even angry at what's happened or what's been said or done. So at those times, we need to give this loving kindness to ourselves, this friendliness to ourselves, soothe ourselves, and in that way deal with the anger within us. Then it's possible we can deal with the other person in a better way. So this is not suppression, because we're acknowledging what we're experiencing, and we're dealing with it in a way that is beneficial for our own happiness and well-being. And it's not expression, because we're not acting on that anger and resentment and giving the other person some harsh speech or some harmful actions. The Buddha actually recommends 5 techniques for dealing with anger and resentment. I'll just mention them briefly. Metta, which is what I'm just talking about, and also compassion, having compassion for the other person, because you know that they were not in a good space if they do or they act or they speak like that. And also having equanimity, this sort of acceptance that they're like this at the moment, this person, but this situation, but it won't always be. And then the 4th method he mentions is to ignore or just not pay attention to it. Now that's pretty tough. That's pretty hard. And the 5th method he mentions for removing resentment or anger is to reflect that this person, myself included, we are the owners of our karma. We're the heirs of it. We're the heirs of our actions of body, speech and mind. And whatever and also we are born from it. This is like our relatives, it's so close to it, it's our refuge. Whatever acts we do that are good or bad, we will get the result, so will they. And this is a sort of understanding that doesn't wish harm on the other person, but it knows whatever we do negatively will give rise to negative results. So this is where that wisdom can come in, can be very helpful actually. So those 5 methods that the Buddha mentions, it's in it must be in the Anguttara Nikaya, that's numerical discourses in the 5. So I think it's Sutta 162, number 1, yeah, because we've been talking about that recently, last month, I think. So I hope you find that useful. The Buddha's teachings are always very useful, and we've just got to find out how we can practice it and make it real for ourselves, make it work for us. So I wish you well with that. And this is an important part of our practice. I think people often think that defilements are getting in the way of our practice, but I say to people, they are our practice. Dealing with them, learning from them. So thank you very much, and may you develop these positive relationships, and may you have a happy Lunar New Year and also an enjoyable St. Valentine's Day. St. Vincent's is a charity here in Melbourne, so that help people. So please have and celebrate these days in the best possible way, to bring happiness to yourself and to your relationships. Sadhu, sadhu. And now we can pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. If you'd like to join in, you're welcome. I'll do the chanting actually, so that's all right. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for watching today.